Hi, I'm Ty. I work for CO2 Australia as a carbon service provider. The Mallee plantings that you see here were started in the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, when these planting projects that you see were established, the method at the time was called the reforestation and afforestation methodology. CO2 Australia was a part of developing that method based on really intense allometric data that was collected about the mallees. So it's things like how much carbon was stored in the above ground biomass, underground in the root systems, and there was these destructive sampling where we had to take away trees to really measure exactly how much carbon is in the trees. Therefore, we were restricted by the types of trees we could register under the method.
Hi, I'm Chris from CO2 Australia. I'm a plantations officer. I maintain and manage properties around New South Wales for CO2. So with the measuring of the trees, we measure 30 centimetres from the ground up on the base, limbs down to at least 1 centimetre in diameter, as well as we do the canopy in amongst the belts to determine how much canopy is above, and as well as we measure the height of the trees. And we only measure 5 of them trees because it's only an average on what we need to do with that, but we have to measure a good 30 odd trees in a plot for the carbon sequestration. So with our plots, we go out with GPS points that have been given to us randomly. We will measure across a number of belts and determine how long the length of the plot's going to be and what trees we're going to measure in that plot. And the data goes back to the office, and then they determine how much carbon is storing in that plot and takes an average across the whole plantation.
One of the few disadvantages that I've come across is the encroachment in the drier years of the tree roots expanding out into the cropping zone adjacent to the trees. But that's overcome by using a deep ripper, which we've been doing in our cropping paddocks prior to the crops going in. The area that the roots were encroaching was potentially out to about 6 or 8 metres, depending on the rainfall of the season. But since we've been doing that deep ripping, and it has resulted in that extra productivity by just simply breaking those roots that are surface roots.
The edge effect is significant, and particularly in a dry environment like this, in drier years, then nothing grows up near the edges of the trees. And even here where we're standing, it's very obvious there's at least a 5 metre. There's other places where it probably goes out to 10 metres. So by the time you take off that amount of area either side of the rows, that certainly has an impact and reduces our productivity, reduces the amount of pasture we can grow.
The advantage of the trees certainly played a part in 2022, with it being a wet year, where the moisture that was taken out by the trees certainly gave us a better result with the cropping, where the soil wasn't waterlogged.
There was a fire at one of our properties recently. When a fire happens, it's not the end of the world. We know, these mallees, for example, are made to burn. And so when it happens, just let your carbon service provider know just what happened to us. Most landholders will manage the fire themselves. You can get support from the rural fire service. Your carbon service provider really is there to help in the aftermath of the fire effect on the trees. We monitor that the trees seem to be okay. If they look like they're going to regrow, like mallees do, they shoot from a lignotuber that's underground. So if that's happening and the canopy cover is returning, then there's no real effect on the carbon project. But in an instance where the canopy has been severely burnt, or your stocking rate, your number of trees has gone down, then those areas would be removed from the project going forward. When an area is affected by drought, we'd go and monitor and make sure the canopy is coming back and that the trees seem healthy. There are, on some of our properties, areas that had really poor soil for carbon projects. We did a bunch of research at the start of the projects to make sure that wouldn't happen, but sometimes you can't know exactly what's going to happen. And so this property, Talgana, had a pretty rocky soil, and the trees just didn't absorb water there like they did on other areas of the property.
During drought, we have to check out and monitor as well. Trees may die out completely, or they will regenerate and come back thicker than they did before. We've got to wait and see if that happens. So here's a patch among the trees where it died out because of shallow depth in soil, and they haven't recovered from that time. We cannot include that because there's no trees in that area for us to count the carbon that are in them belts. And that's where we have to exclude that part of the belt line.